Hi everyone, welcome to class 3 of the Octopus Basic Walkthrough webinar. I'm Scarlett and I've got my colleague Ina and Yenny joining me for this session. A reminder before we get started, in your Zoom control bar, there is a general chat tab. Everyone can say hello, says hi, and you can tell us where you're from. And there is also a Q&A tab. If you have questions to ask, which is very welcome during the whole webinar session, please click Q&A over there and ask your question there. That makes it easier for us to keep track of the questions to make sure that they do get an answer or at least got recorded so that we can answer them later. So after going through the basic and intermediate lessons, you should have grabbed the basics of Octopus, and we hope you managed to create a few tasks successfully on your own. And in this webinar, Ina and I will go into a little more depth as I walk through how Octopus works to extract data from any web pages, and more importantly, how all the various actions work together in a workflow. Having a good understanding of these basic work principles really builds the backbone for creating more successful and complex scraping tasks. But of course, sometimes you would encounter some trouble while creating your own crawler. So in the second part, Ina will explain how you're going to work with the workflow to troubleshoot a task. So how does Octopus works to extract web data? Octopus works by simulating real human browsing behaviors. Actions like opening web pages, click on anything, any elements on the pages, clicking on the next page button, or scrolling down the pages can all be done in Octopus. And the simulated scraping process is identical to how you'd access to any web data in any everyday browsers. And the whole extraction process is defined automatically in a workflow with each individual action representing a particular interaction with the target web page. And when you are building a scraping task in Octopus, you are essentially creating a scraping workflow that can be translated into a series of instructions for Octopus to follow through. This workflow, however, is created automatically by Octopus while you are interacting with the building browser and the tips panel. So in some cases, you may not need to modify the auto-created workflow, yet in other cases, you may need to build or troubleshoot the workflow manually if things are not working as expected. And in either cases, it is strongly recommended that you grasp the basics of the workflow so you can scrape more precisely and accurately. A workflow consists of a list of actions that are put together in a specific order for scraping the target web page, and the steps of the workflow should always be read from the top to the bottom and from inside to outside for nested actions. And let's take a look at this very classic example on the right-hand side. So the first thing Octopus will do to follow this particular workflow is to go to a web page, meaning to open the target web page. And then the loop item action will instruct Octopus to locate a list of elements on the page. So the extract data action will start to extract data from this list of elements. After Octopus extracted everything from this list on the first page, it will then follow the instruction to click to paginate, meaning to click on the next page button, and then within this nest, start to extract data on the second page, and so on. Click the next page until the workflow gets to the last page. So there is no more next page button, and then the workflow will end. And remember, you can always test run the task to check the progress window, which is very helpful, very important step to do troubleshooting. And let's welcome Ina to elaborate on it now.
Thank you, Scarlett. Hello guys, nice to see you again. This is Ina. Now I will explain how you're gonna work with the workflow to troubleshoot a task. In some cases, you may find the workflow looks good, but the data is not scraped in the way you want, so we'll need to troubleshoot to fix it. There will be three main steps to troubleshoot. Firstly, manually run the workflow. Secondly, adjust the settings of the workflow, and then to have a local test run. After explaining the logic of troubleshooting, I will list some common issues that you may have when scraping data with Octoparse. Let's see how we manually run the workflow first. What do we mean by manually running the workflow? Let's look at this example. As you can see, these actions in the workflow can be clicked. And when you click on one action, this action will be reflected in the built-in browser. For example, when we click Go to Web Page, you can see the web page is reloaded in the built-in browser because this action means to open the web page. And if I click on the Enter text, text is input to the web page. And then we click this click item, you can see the search button is clicked. This is how we manually run the workflow. It's like we are simulating the process of scraping manually by clicking the actions. And when the task runs, Octoparse does exactly the same as we do, but it just automates the process. So we just need to walk through the actions one by one, and following the logic of the workflow, we will see if everything is set up right. And before we manually run the workflow, we need to make sure the workflow order, the action orders in the workflow should be correct. So in case, for example, the loop item is out of the pagination, in case this happens, we can drag this back to the right position like this. All the steps can be dragged into the right place as we want. Now let's see how this workflow will be run. This workflow is designed for scraping products from Amazon pages by searching a keyword. Okay, and let's start on the top of the workflow and then follow the arrows to the end of the workflow. So the first step is go to web page, and then it will enter a keyword into the web page and click the search button. Then it will show a list of products. So here, let's follow the arrow. It should come to the pagination, but note that this is only locate the pagination button, but it does not click on the pagination button. So we need to follow the arrow to go down to the loop item. It will locate all the product links. Then it will click one product link and then extra data from the product detail page. Then it will go back to the loop item again to click the second product page, then extra data, and then go over this again until the last products. Then we should go down to the click to paginate. So now we'll go to the second page, and then it will go back here to the loop item again and go over all the products and then click pagination. So this will go over for several times until the last page. After knowing how the workflow works, we can follow the logic of the workflow to manually run it. And when we click through the actions, we need to watch in the built-in browser to see if the action is reflected correctly in here. Okay, let's start with the go to web page and see if the web page is loaded correctly, and enter text, see it is input in the correct position, and click button to check if the button is clicked and if the page loaded is the correct page. And then should go to the loop item, and you can see if the information, the products are loaded. And then go to the click item. See if the product page is loaded correctly. Last is extra data. Check if the fields here are scraped correctly. And then we need to go to click pagination. We can see if the page goes to the second page correctly. So this is how we manually run the workflow. In case you find something wrong during the process, you can go to the setting at the bottom of the workflow. Every time you click an action here, the settings will show here. And for the go to web page, you can adjust, you can update the URLs here and then adjust the timeout. Other settings will be in the options. You can see clear cookies, use cookies, or scroll down. And retry means to reload the page under certain conditions. And for enter text, you will see you can update the text here. And if the text is not input in the correct position or it is not input, you can click this button and then choose the correct position, and the XPath here will be updated to the right one. The XPath means the path of the element on the web page. Octoparse uses this path to know which element to click or which element to enter the text. So this is quite important, but you can use this button to help you auto-generate one. And for the click item, it also has an XPath here, and you can also use this button to select an element to adjust it if this does not click the right button. And other important settings for the click item can be found in the options and retry. These single actions are easy to understand. The difficult part is about the loop. So I'll elaborate more about this. A loop is a programming function that repeats an instruction continuously until a certain condition is reached. In Octoparse, a loop means to do the actions inside it repeatedly to the elements included in the loop list. For example, in this workflow, the loop includes a list of elements to click, and Octoparse will repeat the action of click to these elements in the loop list and extra data. That means Octoparse will click each link one by one from the loop list and get data from the linked pages. That's the basic logic of a loop. Now let's look at the loop settings. The first thing to pay attention is the loop mode. We have 6 kinds of loop modes. Text list and list of URLs are easy to understand. If you have a list of URLs to open or a list of text to input on the web page, you can use these 2 options. Variable list and fixed list are used to include a list of data elements on the web page. The difference is, variable list can include different numbers of elements that can be matched with a single XPath query. But fixed list is a list of XPath queries with each XPath locating unique element on the page. For example, you want to scrape from these categories, and we need to go to each category page first, then click into each sections under it. The number of sections are different to each category, so we may use a variable list to include the sections. If you do it a fixed list, For those categories that have more sections, they won't be scraped completely. The list of URLs, text list, variable list, fixed list, these four kinds of loop modes will end itself when after all the elements in the loop are all worked through. That means, for example, in the variable list, this loop will end itself when all the product links inside this list have been clicked and extra data. Then it will get to the next step when this loop comes to end. Scroll page is just for scrolling the pages, which we have shown in our last webinar. This can be used to scrape pages that needs to be scrolled down to load more content. The last one we'd like to explain is the single element mode. It will include only one element with one XPath. The special thing about it is this loop won't end when this one element is worked through. This loop will repeat over and over again until the element disappears. Sounds familiar? This is how pagination works. Yes, pagination is actually a loop with single element mode. It ends when the next page button cannot be found. You can also set up end loop here to enter a number, and then this loop will repeat this fixed time. For example, it will go over 5 times, which means it will scrape 5 pages. Don't worry about how to choose the loop modes. Loop modes are usually selected automatically when we are creating the workflow by selecting elements and following the options on tips. You only need to pay attention to it when the workflow goes wrong. To troubleshoot this loop item, we can firstly check the elements that are included in this loop. Check if they are all what we want, and if there are any missing elements, you can try to modify this XPath here to locate all. Then we can choose the click item to see if the link could be clicked and the page is opened correctly. Then we can select another element from the loop list and then click item again to see if it is opened, and we can select other elements from this list again to check if they could all be clicked. Just check several of them, and then we can click the extra data to see if all the fields are correctly scraped. If there are any data fields that needs to be modified, you can do it in the data preview section. And for the pagination, we usually click on this to check if the next page is located correctly. You can see the text shown here. And then click to paginate to see if the page turns to the next page. And we could repeat the steps to see if we could go to the pages one by one. And we'll repeat it. Check if it goes to the next page. Do it several times to make sure it can go to the page we want. If everything works well when we manually run the workflow, we can run this task in the local to have a test. Local run will show a extraction window, and we can watch the scraping lively to see if any step gets stuck. So we click run and run on a device. and we can maximize the extraction window to watch it more clearly. Octoparse will simulate the process inside this built-in browser. You can watch it to open the web page and enter the text, then click the first page, and it will scrape the data into the data preview section. Let's see how the data are being scraped in the data preview section. And it will go over each product and scrape the data. In case you have seen something wrong during the scraping process, you can go back to the workflow to check it and revise the settings. Sometimes manually running the workflow works, but it may still have problems in the test run, like scraping gets no data and stops directly after the run, or it might scrape less data or duplicates, and the data fields may be scraped to the wrong place. I will explain to you how to resolve these common issues. First common problem is that no data is scraped. This usually happens when the web page is not loaded well. So how can we resolve this? We can extend the timeouts for the Go to Web page. Make sure the timeout is long enough for the page to load. And for some cases, we may use this scroll down, set up some scrolls to make sure the page can be loaded well. And we can also set up wait time for the next step after the Go to Web page, because in some cases that the data may not be loaded when the page is loaded. So we can set up wait time, and Octoparse will wait for some time before performing the next step. The second common issue is that the task may scrape less data than it should do. This could also be caused by the web page not loading well. So we can set up a longer timeout for Go to Web page, as we said before, or use scroll page wait time to resolve this. Another setting we can check is the click to paginate. We can extend the AJAX load timeout here to make sure the next pages can be loaded well. Another possibility is that the pagination is not always working during the scraping. That means it may click on the next page button on the first page but fails to do on the following pages. It might click the third page and then the fifth page. So during the scraping, it can skip multiple pages, so the data scraped would be less. If that is the case, we can try to modify the XPath of the pagination here to make sure it can always locate the next page button. And less data could also be related to the loop item mode. As we mentioned before, that if the loop mode is the fixed list, it could miss some data. So we can try to change it to variable list and make sure the loop item will locate as many elements as we want. Another problem is about duplicates. Duplicates are the data lines that are the same in all the columns. In local run, you can choose to delete duplicates when exporting the data. And in Cloud Run, duplicates will be deleted automatically during the scraping. But why does the task scrape duplicates? Firstly, it is possible that pagination has something wrong. In some cases, the pagination might locate the previous page button during the scraping process, so it scrapes the data that has been captured again. Or the pagination still locates the next button, on the last page and keeps scraping the last page data. This can also be resolved by modifying the pagination XPath. Another possible reason is when scraping multiple pages, the AJAX timeout of the pagination is too short, so we need to extend the AJAX timeout for the click to paginate. The last common problem we'd like to cover here today is about data fields. Sometimes there will be blank data fields, or some data is captured to a wrong column. This is because data fields on different pages are not always in the same position. For example, let's look at two Amazon example pages. For this one, it has a manufacturer in the product details. But for this one, there is no manufacturer. So you can see that the ASIN is in line 7 on this product page, but it is in line 6 on this page. So if we take the ASIN data field from this web page, the XPath generated might not work for this page. We may need to modify the XPath of the data fields. We can click More and XPath, Customize XPath, then modify the XPath here, or we can add a alternate XPath. Use this button to select the element, and it will generate an XPath for you. That's all about how to troubleshoot a task. To sum up, the important settings that you should pay attention to are firstly, web page timeout, including the timeout of go to web page and AJAX timeout for click to paginate. Second is pagination. Make sure the XPath always locates the next button. Third is the loop item. Make sure it includes all the elements you want with the correct loop mode. And you may have found the importance of using a correct XPath. We highly recommend you to learn more about XPath. It will help a lot in troubleshooting the workflow. Here comes our Q&A session. You can leave your questions now in the Q&A tab. We will answer the questions. Due to the time limit, we may only pick up some of the questions. Don't be sad if your questions are not answered. You can always send it to support@octoparse.com.